Hello.
Hello.
And you are?
Yes, okay. I'm Jarmo Ritalahti, Principal Lecturer of Tourism at Haaga-Helia, and you are?
I'm Pia Kiviaho-Kallio, Lecturer in Communication in the Tourism Program at Haaga-Helia.
And the topic of this short lecture is tourism, that is one of the biggest industries in the world.
And I would like to hear some figures as proof. Can it be the biggest or one of the biggest industries?
It is one of the biggest industries, and to be honest, so last year, 2018, we made 1.4 billion international trips all around the world.
Oh, that's a lot, 1.4 billion.
That's a lot, but perhaps I should remind you that tourism is concentrated, or travel is concentrated only to certain individuals in the world.
Okay, so we can say that there are those who stay and those who go.
Yes, they are. Yes, you are correct. Correct. So it's very difficult to say how many people or individuals really travel, but I would say that not more than 500 million, so 500 million or even less.
Okay. And what about the situation with Finland?
Finns are nowadays again one of the... Finns travel a lot, and we are perhaps that group of people who travel most in the world. Finns did last year about 8 million leisure trips. That also includes the national trips, or when we traveled in our own country.
Okay. And we are here to talk about cultural tourism. So, as an introduction, would you like to show some statistics on tourism?
Okay, so Europe is the most popular tourist destination in the world. And Europe has been that already for decades.
And even centuries.
Centuries, I would say, because, but of course when we talk about the history, so we know most about the history in Europe and not that much about history in the other continents.
Yes, right.
So our view is very Eurocentric.
Exactly. So we have the very old destinations like Paris.
We have Paris. Okay, Paris is an old one, but we have still older destinations that are not in Europe, to be honest, that are in Middle East.
Yes, exactly.
Like Egypt, like Jerusalem, and so on.
Yes, actually, I read about the old Romans 2,000 years ago, and they traveled to Egypt to see the pyramids.
Yeah, they do that, and to be honest, they also travel to Greece to have sex. So, in a way, the motives to travel are about the same today than they were over 2,000 years ago.
Okay, that's really
Yeah.
exciting and surprising.
Yes. Okay, before we go on to the interesting history of tourism, so perhaps we should first explain how do we see tourism as a phenomenon.
Yeah.
My background is in geography, so I see tourism as a spatial phenomenon, and I would just draw you a picture and try to explain it to you. So, when we talk about tourism as a spatial phenomenon, we have first the tourist generating areas, we have destination areas, and then we have the transit area. So when we think about the tourist generating areas, they are mostly countries of higher wealth. So like Europe, like North America, nowadays more and more China. And then we have destination areas that are perhaps more spread all over the world. And we have, of course, destinations in Europe. As we said already earlier, Europe is the most popular destination area in the world. And what is the most important or most popular destination? Have you idea where people travel most?
The most popular destinations I would say maybe the old Spain.
Spain is the second.
Yeah, and Greece,
Greece
before
is,
the financial crisis, maybe.
Yeah, Greece is perhaps one of the most popular destinations from Finland,
Okay, so
especially when we talk about package holidays.
all right. So
But
please
then
tell.
the destination number one last year was France.
Okay.
Over 80 million international visitors.
Yes.
And then we have Spain, and then we have USA.
All right.
And then when we look at the tourist generating areas, we have there China.
Mm-hmm.
So Chinese people are traveling more and more.
And this we can see in Finland, as Finland is a gateway due to our Finnair flights
Yes.
and other
Yeah.
airline companies
Yeah.
flying in from Asia.
Yeah. We have a lot of Chinese or more and more Chinese tourists visiting Finland, but they are more or less here just to change the plane.
Yes, so as I said, gateway.
Gateway.
We are a gateway
We would welcome them more as how would I say, stopover visitors, but they very often have, or they are busy going on, flying on from Finland to other European destinations.
So here actually maybe Finland should brand itself better as a cultural tourist destination. So you could stay here for a couple of days
Yeah,
due to interesting culture.
yeah, that's true.
Would that be possible?
It is possible, but then it's not only about Finland as a country.
Yeah.
And Visit Finland, that is part of Business Finland, Finland's organization that wants, that is marketing Finland and branding Finland as a destination. But then it's also a question of the carriers, those airlines that use Helsinki as a hub to Europe.
Yeah.
What kind of products and services they offer to the visitors or to the customers, to the passengers.
Yes.
Okay, but China is important, US is important, and Germany is important.
Yes, Germans have been for many, many years coming into Finland. And in the old days, German used to be the first foreign language we learned here.
Yes.
Now it's English, of course, but we
Yeah.
have a long tradition of welcoming Germans.
Yeah, in a way, but then that's a generation question as well. So now that generation of Germans who came to Finland earlier, so they are retired or even passed away, and then it's difficult, it's challenging to get then younger generation
Yes.
of Germans here. The same we could say about Sweden as well,
Yeah.
and the Swedish visitors.
So maybe, well, there is a niche for those who are ecological and who looks for sustainability. So,
That's an issue,
Yeah.
and perhaps that's also kind of challenge in Finland. Finland is known for its nature, its clean air,
yeah.
and also officially Finland is promoted as a country of nature, clean nature and peacefulness and quietness. But then, to be honest, most of the visitors who come to Finland, they are more interested in culture.
Yeah, and here is what we want to address in this course.
Yes.
So that's why
Yeah.
we created this project.
Yes, in a way, to give a picture of Finland as a destination of cultural tourism.
Yeah.
If I go back to this picture, as I
Yes.
said, we have tourist generating areas where the tourists come from, and then we have destination areas, and then we have the transit area, transit zone. So this transit area is more or less about traveling. It's about the routes, flight routes, and they can be rail tracks or boat routes. But then they are not as clear physically than these tourist generating areas and then destination areas. So before people can travel, there must be something in the destinations as well as in the tourist generating areas that allow people to travel. Any ideas, Pia, what allows or makes people to travel from the tourist generating areas?
First of all, you need to have the money.
Yes.
It is rather expensive the further you go.
Yeah.
And so you need to have a strong and solid middle class.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my hunch.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also, it's not only about money; it's also about leisure time.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so if you look at our stereotypical image of Asia,
Yeah.
hardworking people, no holidays.
Yeah.
Also applying for the USA, where
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
have paid holidays.
No.
But
no.
when you start having holidays, then you have, as you said, the time.
Yes.
So money, time, and I would say the curiosity.
Okay, curiosity as
to
well.
go there.
And then also information. We need information. We
Yeah.
need data about the tourist destinations as well as how to, in a way, travel from the tourist generating areas to the destination areas.
Yes, and maybe today with digitization there is more knowledge, more than ever before. You can
Absolutely. Yeah.
you can travel. Now actually travel has been transferred to even before you go on the trip. You are at home watching videos and listening to podcasts.
Yeah, everything,
Yes.
everything. So this change of acquiring information has been very fast.
Yes.
In the 80s or even in the beginning of 90s, people, travelers were very dependent on the intermediaries and their expertise.
Yeah, and here is the big question that it seems that travel has become more individualized
Yes,
again, because it used to be historically very individual, only for the rich upper class.
yes. And
Yeah.
then in a way this kind of, okay, I'm a bit afraid of talking mass tourism.
Yeah.
Mass tourism, because we can say that mass tourism started already in the 19th century when people started to travel by train.
Yeah, that was 1840s
40s,
with
yes,
Thomas
yes.
Cook
Yeah, Thomas
Yeah.
Cook, in a way, he was the first
in Britain. Yes.
in UK, so he was the first tour operator.
Yeah.
Tour operator founded his business in 1841. But as you have perhaps followed the news lately, so Thomas Cook, in a way, went to bankrupt
Yes. Yes.
this autumn,
Yeah.
so that was in a way very sad.
Yeah, one couldn't miss
Yeah,
that
yeah.
huge piece of news.
Yeah, but then in a way, when we talk about package holidays, and tour operating, so I told you already that Finns did about 8 million trips, leisure trips. So about 10% of those trips were package holidays, about
Okay.
800,000.
Yeah.
But that's only one part of the international travel Finns do. But then when we talk about, as I said, so this is about the phenomenon itself. But then when we go to business, we have the service suppliers
Yes.
in the destinations, and then we have the middlemen or
Mhm.
intermediaries who then links the customer, the end user, the tourist to the supplier.
Yes.
And this was earlier in the hands of the travel agencies and tour operators. But now what Pia already told us, that the internet has freed the customers from the hands of travel or traditional travel intermediaries.
Yes, and you have new actors like Airbnb and...
Yeah, we have this phenomenon called sharing economy or
Yes.
platform economy, however you want to, in a way,
Yeah,
name it, so people have an access directly to the suppliers, and then there is not that much anymore need of the traditional intermediaries.
yes. Do you think, I've been following discussion now in Barcelona, which is affected by over-tourism, and especially they are very worried about sharing economy phenomena like Airbnb, which increases the rental prices.
Yes,
and
yeah.
they have far too many tourists coming to one single spot.
Yeah, yeah. This is an interesting topic, and of course, when Pia named here Barcelona, that is one of the most popular cultural destinations,
Yeah.
or cultural tourist destinations in the world, so in Europe. So it's a very difficult problem at the moment. Over-tourism, I would say that when we talk about Barcelona, we talk about Paris and other popular destinations. So over-tourism is more in the eyes of the local people. And tourists themselves don't find over-tourism as a big problem.
Okay.
But then let's see, and this Airbnb or sharing economy, it started with a very good idea.
Yeah.
That people could share something they don't use all the time. But now, for example, Airbnb sharing rooms or beds or apartments, so it has turned to a commercial activity, and investors buy full houses with
Yeah.
several or with a lot of apartments, and they let them to be rent out through then Airbnb.
And maybe the legislation is lagging behind, so...
Legislation
that's
is
one problem.
lagging behind,
Yeah.
because then those who rent their, for example, apartments on Airbnb, they don't need to follow the same legislation and laws than where traditional hotels
Yes.
and hotel chains.
Yes, and hotels are very regulated,
Yeah.
down to details like how many people can stay in the room due to
Yeah,
fire
yeah,
regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, why do people then look for options like Airbnb or options what Airbnb offers? It is partly about cultural tourism. People want to see how local people live.
Yeah, so culture is not only art galleries and
No, not at
concerts,
all,
but
not
it
at all.
is the quotidian life
Yeah.
of going to the supermarket. for instance.
Supermarket and marketplaces and cafes and restaurants to do shopping or groceries. So and people can
Yeah.
also jump to the public transportation and look where is the end station of this bus line and
Yeah.
so on. So
And there are services like Meet the Local you can find on the internet.
Yeah. And then of course we can say that sports tourism is part of cultural tourism. Sport is part of culture. So there are a lot of other things than, in a way, operas and galleries and museums.
Yes, so that's a bit of a stereotypical view of, a narrow view of cultural
absolutely.
tourism.
Okay, perhaps we have now kind of explained tourism as a phenomenon, and we have talked a bit about the business of tourism. Let's go now, let's have a short look at the history of tourism.
Yeah, so I would really like to bring in something.
Yes,
So
do.
I'm leaving the stage to bring in
Yeah.
an old album. So here is a 120-year-old picture card album from Germany. And this was my grandfather who traveled to study, because in Finland you couldn't study veterinary medicine, so you had to go to Dresden in Germany in the late 19th century, early
Yeah.
20th century.
Yeah, there were a lot of Finns have traveled abroad to study, not only to become a veterinary, but also artists
Yeah.
have traveled to study also in Dresden, I think,
Yeah.
in Berlin, in Paris, and other cultural cities.
We have Edelfelt, who is famous for his wonderful Paris
Yeah.
paintings, and many female Finnish artists. They
yeah,
did in
yeah.
Italian light.
Yeah.
People well, for the Norse artists were looking for the light. So
Yeah.
that was during the Romantic era of
Yeah.
travel, but even before, in the medieval times,
Yes.
Finns would go to Paris, to Sorbonne, which was a
Yeah.
medieval university, to study
Yeah.
study religion,
Yes.
so to become
And
priests.
several of our medieval bishops and priests got their education in European universities before we got our university in Turku in the 17th
Yes.
century.
And Mikael Agricola spent a long time in Germany,
Yeah.
so direct contact
Yeah.
with the Protestant
Yeah.
Reformation.
Yeah.
So people were very international
Yeah.
early on.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm a linguist by formation, so I'm interested in the early stages of culture and language. And
Yeah.
somehow the human being has developed by traveling, so it is something very, very fundamental to us.
Absolutely.
So some people have a strong wish to go away.
Yeah. Okay, there are different motivations why people travel,
Yeah.
and we have kind of how would I say, the destinations have attractions, and then or pull factors,
Yeah.
and then the tourist generating areas have push factors that make people to travel, and what Pia here explained. So the pull factors in medieval Europe were perhaps linked to studying and to studies in these old traditional universities.
And of course also for the more wealthy people who are not priests, it was a pilgrimage.
Yes, pilgrimage is an old way, or old motive to travel, and the first, of course, when we think about Christianity, now we are also a bit too focused here, but pilgrimage has been an important mode of traveling, and Christians started to travel first to Jerusalem to follow the footsteps of Jesus, and then little by little saw the destinations, especially in the early Middle Ages, when the traveling was dangerous, so Europeans stayed in Europe, visited Rome in a way, the capital of Pope, and then there were also other pilgrimage destinations like Santiago de Compostela in Spain, that is still a popular place to visit, and people are nowadays following the same pilgrimage routes than people used in the Middle Ages.
Yes, and in English language, one of the most important literary works from the medieval times by Geoffrey Chaucer in the mid-14th century, Canterbury Tales, is about ordinary people traveling on a pilgrimage to Canterbury, and they stay in the Tabard Inn and tell stories.
Now when you mentioned inns,
Yeah.
I must add here that one of the first, in a way, laws and legislation in the countries were related to travel and travelers.
Oh, interesting.
Already in the, in a way, ancient Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
So the laws were kind of forced people to protect travelers who were more or less kind of salespeople.
Yes.
Who traveled, and in a way that perhaps we could call them today business travelers.
Yeah, so you had business travel thousands of years ago. And that makes sense because for human development, to do business, you need to meet with new tribes and new cultures to exchange something you don't have and sell in return something.
And also in Sweden, in the medieval Sweden, so the king Magnus Ladu laws, so he gave also a law about inns in the early 14th century.
Okay.
That there had to be inns in that time Sweden.
Yes.
To help the travelers to have a place to sleep, change the horse, and then also to sleep and eat.
Yeah, so to provide shelter.
Shelter, yes. Yeah. So in that way, traveling. Perhaps we can't talk about tourism, but especially traveling has been important for the economies of already ancient and medieval states.
I was in Vicenza in Italy, and I saw Pigafetta's house. Pigafetta was an early tourist who went on the first tour around the world.
Okay,
and he survived the trip.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, it was in a way the traveling became easier after the Middle Ages, so Europe got more perhaps stable politically, and the roads became safer, and then in the 17th century especially well-off British gentlemen, young gentlemen started to travel in Europe. It is partly, it can be called also cultural tourism, but in a way the definition was and still is today grand tours.
Yeah, and this grand tour, that was a very fundamental part of the development of a young British male. So it was a necessity. It lasted often 2 years was a standard, and they would have cicerons with them who would guide them into architecture and history, but also lots of what we could see as partying.
Yes, it was also, it was not only...
Seeing actually old fellow countrymen, other British people.
So these were kind of educational trips, and it was in a way the European culture, ways of living, also networking with the European nobility and also tradespeople, business people. Of course the young men also learned something about life itself.
Yes.
So partying and all this kind of interesting themes during their trips. And it was not only British, it was also little by little Germans.
Yeah.
Germans and other central and continental European people. But then it took end in the 18th century little by little.
So it was about self-development.
Yes.
Maybe we could say that cultural tourism has this aspect of self-development, so
absolutely.
Cultivating the mind.
Yes, yeah. And then when we come to the 19th century, so the introduction of trains, and then also steam engine and in the trains and then in the boats or ships, so then that allowed also masses to travel, and travel became perhaps more common, but still in a way it was more for the better off people.
Yes, but then if we look at the 19th century with industrialization, the middle class grew. So,
yes, absolutely.
So they would have the possibility to go on a short trip.
Yeah, then we can talk about the period of romanticism, and that people went to see beautiful landscapes, Alps, for example, mountains.
Yeah, looking for the sublime was the term.
Yeah, absolutely. But then there was also the culture. So perhaps what we try to rationalize here is that culture has always been a motive to travel. Yeah. And we can talk about cultural tourists or tourists who are interested in culture, but it's a bit perhaps too focused nowadays because people have different motivations to travel, and they want to experience different things during their trip. But there are a lot of people who go abroad to see the culture, and they say that this time I'm going to be a cultural tourist. I want to see this and this museum, I want to see this and this church, this and this palace.
Yes, and at its best, cultural tourism preserves some elements of local cultures.
Absolutely.
And somehow, now we are more and more conscious about sustainability, and people are a bit hesitant of flying. So people tend to justify their travel by, for instance, culture.
Absolutely.
I travel because I wish to invest in the local culture and to learn something.
Yeah.
So you don't say, I'm just going to for the fun and for relaxing. But
okay, there are also people who go there and they are honest and say, so I have worked hard and
I have the right.
I have the right to relax. Relax. But then we know what Pia mentioned here, that now there is kind of flight shame. So. It's original from Sweden.
Yeah, there's flygskam.
So people are now a bit hesitant to fly, and I kind of understand it, because even though the aeroplanes are more efficient nowadays, but you know where the number of aeroplanes is growing so fast.
Yeah.
So the number or the amount of emissions caused by aeroplanes is going up all the time. It's rising or increasing, and that's the problem or challenge, and tourism as an industry must somehow to do something to that.
Yeah. What about the future? So will we have something like virtual cultural tourism? I heard an interesting lecture on the Alvar Aalto Museum in Helsinki, and they don't want a big amount of tourists there, so they are making a digital version of the museum so people can visit it online. So
Yeah.
how do you see this trend of digitalization, virtual tourism?
That's a very good question, Pia. And people are not. People are very neutral according to one of my researches or studies. So, virtual tourism. It's perhaps difficult for people to understand what it is all about, and they are rather neutral. And for example, 10 years ago, there was a huge talk about virtual tourism and will it replace traditional traveling, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, that maybe you need also the embodied feeling of
Absolutely.
hearing the sounds, smelling
and,
feeling
yes,
the climate
yeah,
on your
yeah.
skin. So
Absolutely.
it can't only be relied on visuals.
No, absolutely no.
So it's the technology is not advanced enough
No,
yet.
but I think in a way you can do nowadays also virtual cultural tourism when popping into the web pages of certain institutions, museums,
Yeah.
and so on. But but it lacks something, I would say,
Yes.
and you already listed those
Yeah.
elements.
But maybe, yes, it lacks something, but it can be a complement. So if you
Yes.
think of big art museums, they have lots of work stored in the basement, so a virtual exhibition can exhibit every single item
Yes.
in the museum.
Absolutely. But then when we come to virtual tourism, we can also talk about augmented reality.
Yeah.
Augmented reality is something that is in a way in the destination, in the attractions people visit. So it kind of enriches the experience on the spot. So we can in a way make the history more living than just looking at painted walls or paintings and of a palace. With augmented reality we can get the people also from
So-
the history.
Yes,
there.
so you get the stories.
Yeah.
And storytelling is now a big trend in tourism,
Mm.
so lots of destinations want to highlight the stories of normal
Yeah.
people who used to live and who are, well, right now living in the destination.
Absolutely. And then just in the end of this short lecture, so I would perhaps like to remind you that we are very different travelers and we have different motives. The travelers can be divided to different groups. Cultural tourists are one. We have leisure tourists that travel for leisure. They can be also cultural tourists. We have sport tourists. They can be divided to passive and active ones. We have people who prefer package holidays. We have tourist visitors. We have tourists who prefer individual traveling. So we have the group travelers. We have individual travelers. So
Yeah, and depending on life situation
and
can
everything. So our
be
behavior.
many of these aspects.
And our travel behavior has changed because earlier so we were classified and the classes were kind of rather strict. So
Yes.
you were a cultural tourist, you used perhaps in a way 5-star services in 5-star hotels, top restaurants and so on. But nowadays, so one day you can go for 5-star services and the next day you stay in Airbnb.
So the picture is more fragmented.
Absolutely, and
Yes.
also our behavior has changed a lot.
Yes, maybe this is what we could call sort of postmodernism.
I think that's
In the-
postmodernism
in
and
travel.
also when we talk about we already talked about Grand Tours. And we can say that Grand Tours might be back already now.
Yes, and here as a task, you get to read our recent article, Jarmo and I wrote on the Grand Tours.
Or blog, perhaps,
yes,
blog text.
Yes.
But then in a way, this traditional cultural, or form of cultural tourism, like Grand Tours, so they might come back. They won't last for 2 years. They can last about 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But people travel slower. People take perhaps boats and trains.
Yes.
Trains instead of flying. So let's see
Yeah.
what will happen.
So somehow this is a cycle that the trends go in cycles. And this is a fascinating topic. So thank you, Jarmo, for sharing this with us.
Thank you, Pia, for being here with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.